Good morning, everyone, and welcome to The Future. My name's Chris Calabucas, and once again, we're coming at you live from deep in the heart of Silicon Valley, California. We're talking innovation startups, the future, not necessarily those, and not necessarily in that order. If you're watching on YouTube, smack that subscribe button and hit that bell so you can be notified when a new show comes online. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast service, please subscribe and please drop a note on Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly, greatly appreciate it. And if you have comments for the show, please leave them in the comments below. So I just want to talk a little bit about another exercise that we do during, or I do during our ideation sessions. And this one's called Be Incongruent. So it's really interesting. I find it really interesting that normal human beings have this tendency for congruency. And you're probably saying to yourself, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that, Chris? Well, being congruent is basically when you say something, say that you're going to do something, you promise something, or you make a vow, or not, you don't have to make a vow. If you think about doing things in a certain direction, then you pretty much have to do things in that direction. You feel bad when you don't do that. Like, say, for example, you promised somebody that you were going to be somewhere. Say you were going to meet somebody for lunch, and you're going to meet him for lunch at 11:30, which is the Silicon Valley lunchtime, at a particular restaurant. And you didn't get stuck in traffic, but you goofed around and you left late, and you eventually got there, but you got there late. And when you get there late, most people who promised being there at 11:30 feel bad about not being able to be there at 11:30. If you think about it, you ideated that I was going to be there at 11:30, and then you executed going to the place and being there at 11:30. And then when you couldn't quite meet that executable, you felt bad about it. You think, damn, I let this person down. And I think most human beings are like that. They say something, and then they want to do that, and they feel wrong. They feel that something's wrong when they don't do it. And I think the experiment that I was reading about was about mushroom eating or something like that. There's two different groups of people, and they had one group argue for mushroom eating, and they had another group argue against mushroom eating. And they each presented their arguments for and against mushroom eating. And then what they did is that after they did that, they switched it. And they had the ones that argued for mushroom eating argue against it, and then the opposite for the other group. What ended up happening is that their arguments second time around were much weaker because they had already been pretty strong about arguing for or against mushroom eating. So it was difficult for them to take a incongruent stance on something they had argued so passionately about. So if I argue passionately with you about X, it's hard for me not to do X after I've told you and promised that I'm going to do X. It's kind of like some of the things that work behind weight loss things. So if you say, I'm going to lose 20 pounds, they say, publish it. I'm going to lose 20 pounds in 6 months. So you publish that on YouTube. You publish that on Instagram. You publish it on Facebook. You tell all your friends, hey, this is what I'm going to do. So you'll feel bad when you don't do it. It's additional pressure to get you to be congruent, to follow what you're going to say with action. And I think that's one of the interesting things about human beings is that they typically do that. They typically attempt to remain congruent. Their words and their actions align. Normal human beings. I mean, there's plenty of psychopaths, sociopaths out there who do the exact opposite, right? Hypocrites. Everybody knows a hypocrite, right? Anyway, so taking that as a default, that most human beings like to be congruent, then if you think about it, when you're trying to innovate, congruency might be a negative, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to build something new. You're trying to create something new. So what you have to do is attempt to break the congruency when you're in the innovation sessions and try to get people to do something different from what they say they were going to do. And one of the quickest ways to do that is opposite day, right? If you're going to say, I'm going to do X, well, do the opposite of X or do something completely different. What would happen? How would you feel? Would this be a big deal? Would this not be a big deal? Try being incongruent. And in that incongruency, that will open up new horizons for thinking. See, this is one of the things I fully believe in, is that a lot of times human beings, well, I use the word lazy, but some people say they have inertia, they're preserving resources or something like that. There's something about human beings is that we try not to do extra work if we don't have to, right? We try to conserve our resources as much as possible. And the problem with conserving your resources as much as possible is you tend to do the same thing over and over again. You tend to get into your rut, set systems around you in a certain way so that you can do a certain thing. And these are the things that you do on a regular basis, and you don't want to change because the inertia is too strong. But when you're trying to innovate, when you're trying to build new products, new services, innovative new things, then you need to break out of that groove. You need to get out of that. You need to fight against the inertia. So, and one of the ways of fighting against the inertia is to be incongruent. Say you're going to do one thing and do another. And I know you might feel bad. You might say to yourself, God, that feels horrible. But sometimes that's a good thing. I think I told you before in some shows about the guy who hadn't showered for 12 years. 12 years! And what he'd done is instead of showering, he would spray himself with an antibacterial spray. And this antibacterial spray would basically destroy all bacteria. And supposedly, he would be able to be clean without having to take a shower. Now, the thing I read for this was obviously he played for disgust. They say, well, what does this guy smell like? Some people say he smells okay, but he's got like a little bit of a tone to him and stuff like that. But if you think about it, I mean, California's been through a drought. People are concerned about water. Shouldn't we be looking into things like that? So if the thing that you're building, if you're creating it, and it seems weird, it seems a little off, it's upsetting some people, they're feeling edgy about it, maybe you're onto something. Maybe you can build, you're seeing something there. Maybe there's a product there that actually might be interesting. Maybe there's something there that could be turned into something that's new and disruptive in that market. You just don't know. So that's a couple of tools that I use during my ideation sessions. So being incongruent, trying something different, and then don't be afraid of upsetting people. Don't be afraid of making people feel uncomfortable with some of these ideas that you've come up with, because I think that's where the nuggets of the good stuff come from. That's it for me for today. See you next time, and until then, don't forget to think future.